My recollections would go clear back to kindergarten, and the self-perception that there was something different about me than the other boys. Other boys seemed more confident, athletic, which I wasn't at all. I was very withdrawn, very shy, very drawn, very attracted to boys who I deemed to be more handsome than I was. Obviously, it was not a sexual attraction in the very beginning, but as I grew with each passing year, I looked back on those times and reinterpreted them as having been gender issues. When I got into high school in particular, looking back and kind of interpreting the entirety of my life as having been homosexual. My father was a decent man, but my father was very emotionally withdrawn. My parents were not particularly close. My father had something of a dream child in my older brother, who was more mechanically inclined, who liked sports, who enjoyed hunting and fishing with Dad. I was kind of selected, I think, early on to be my mother's little partner. So when my brother and my father went off hunting or fishing and would be gone for 2 or 3 days, I was to be the little man of the house with my mom. I was much more connected with my mother emotionally and relationally than I was with my father. There was a depth of masculinity, of maleness in my father that seemed unreachable for me. I could not attain to it. So my earliest perception with my father was that he possessed something that I didn't seem to possess. And that only grew as far as my perception in elementary school, and then certainly after puberty and going into junior high, high school. I think in looking back, they seem to have the whole package of what boys, in my estimation, should have. Boyish boys, ruggedly good looks, confidence, good physique, social connection with those around them, social desirability. And I really lacked all of those things. I detested sports very early on. I was a very shy boy and the butt of a lot of joking quite early. Probably first grade was when the name calling began, queer and homo, sissy, those kinds of things, which at the time I had no idea what they meant, other than the general perception that they were derogatory in nature. And it made me feel that much more alienated from the boys. So I either stayed in class during recess or went off to a part of the playground all by myself. I think there were a lot of romantic and relational needs that were not being addressed by my father. My father was not a good communicator. My father and mother really didn't exhibit a lot of physical affection, or I didn't see them talking a lot. My mother, I was the youngest in our family, and my mother was artistically inclined. She did projects with me, taught me how to draw, but there was a darker side to the relationship with her that became the stuff of therapy later in my life. There were boundary issues with my mother, both sexually and emotionally, that at the time I would have viewed as normal between a mother and son. It was only later that I was able to look back and realize that there was a very unhealthy enmeshment between my mother and I, and some real disturbing ways that she related to me as a child that I would characterize very easily today as sexual abuse early on, ritual sexual abuse with my mother. I think she had a love-hate relationship with men. It was only later in life that I came to understand that my grandfather had molested my mother and both of her sisters. My mother was married previously before my father, and that man was abusive. He later molested my sister, my older sister, half-sister. So I think Mom came into the marriage with some real counts against men. And I don't think Dad could ever please her at any given time. That was part of his desire, I think, to get out of town, just as often as he could, fishing and hunting. At age either 10 or 11, I met my first real male friend. And fairly quickly, and I don't know who initiated it, but I spent the night with him and our clothes came off. And the way I say it, I felt like I had died and gone to Disneyland. There was something so enticing, so dynamic, something that touched things deep inside of me. I would view it now as the first male that I really had any kind of bond or connection with at the time. Unfortunately, it turned sexual very quickly. Between the ages of 11 and 15, I probably had upwards of 300 sexual experiences with him and with another neighborhood boy. All three of us were the same age. So there was a fairly deeply seated pattern beginning to develop for me. At age 12, I was molested by a teacher. At age 15, I was molested by a teacher. And at age 16, I was raped by a man who had gotten me drunk. And the residual impact of those experiences, especially when I was 15, and the teacher had groomed me very carefully over the course of the summer, was the lingering questions and doubts about myself. What did he see in me? Why was it that out of all the boys in the class, he picked me out to do this? What I didn't realize until later was that he had done this to dozens and dozens of boys my age. I was just another person in the process. But for me, it went a lot deeper. I really thought, well, I must be gay. There must be something in me that he sees and is able to seize upon. And that kind of sealed it for me at age 15. At age 15, when the three of us boys who had had sexual relations with one another for several years, in an unspoken way, I think all of us came to the realization that when adults do these things, they're faggots. And we all backed off from participation. Not one of us initiated another sexual contact with the other, and we had never talked about it with each other. But it was at that juncture when I realized stopping the behavior, stopping the experiences didn't change anything on the inside of me. If anything, the desire grew more intense. It was deeper for me. It was a longing that I couldn't address in any other way. And by that juncture, I looked back on the entirety of my life and began to put two and two together, connecting the dots, going back to kindergarten, going back to first grade, and recalling the boys that I was very attracted to and continued to be attracted to with each passing year, and coming to the faulty conclusion that I was gay.
Pure passion that beats for Christ alone.